Okay, all right, let's get started. So my name is Chris Kirsch. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of RunZero. And today, I would like to give you a demo of our product. RunZero is a solution that helps you with asset inventory across IT and OT and cloud and remote environments. So really everywhere that you might have devices. And just show of hands, like who here thinks that they have really good asset inventory across all their environments? Okay, I'm getting two, and everybody else has got their hand down. Yeah, you are not alone, right? This is a very common problem. I see this across very small companies. I see it across very large companies. We serve, like Fortune 50 companies down to mid-market and SMB. And government agencies as well. So why is asset inventory important? Number one, there's, the very basic thing, you can't protect what you don't know. So that's one thing. Number two, asset inventory is really foundational to your security program. You can't really become proactive about your security program unless you know what's connected. And so if you're looking at the CIS benchmarks, NIST cybersecurity framework, you will see that asset inventory and software inventory are really at position number 1 and 2 there before you even start with any of the other things. The reason why a lot of asset inventory is struggling today, I think, is because most of the approaches are either assuming that you're logging onto a device, mostly with Active Directory credentials or sometimes SNMP, or that you have an agent on the device, right? So this is a lot of people are trying to solve this either with ServiceNow with authenticated scanning or an agent, or they're using secondary data from their EDR agents or from their vulnerability scans to figure out what they have on the network. But that gives you huge blind spots, and we'll talk about that. So how do we do that? We use a combination of two things. One is an unauthenticated active scan on the network, which is optimized for asset inventory. Super fast, super easy to roll out. And the other part is API sources. So integrating into your cloud environments, your EDR, your vulnerability management, VMware, Active Directory, MDM, G Suite, all of these different things. And so you're getting both breadth across IT, OT, cloud, and remote, and then depth on all of the devices to really know what's going on. So the active unauthenticated scanner, that is really the part where we help figuring out what the unmanaged devices are on the network. My co-founder is HD Moore. Who here knows Metasploit as a tool? All right, great. Awesome. So Metasploit is a network penetration testing tool. He's the creator of that. And he founded RunZero and basically took all the little tricks that he's learned on pen tests in the recon phase. Not exploitation, nothing overly aggressive, but just things, information leaks that the infrastructure gives up or that devices give up. And he's put all of these together in a very easy to use solution that allow you to figure out what's on your network. So let's get into the demo real quick. So I talked about the fact that we're able to figure out a few things. So I think here on the first tab, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm talking and demoing, and we only have 20 minutes. So I opened up a lot of things in tabs, but we can click through some things if you have questions. So we figure out what is the operating system for all the devices, right? And then also what is the actual hardware underlying these things. So if you scan a lot of things with, let's say, the vulnerability scanners, they will tell you something is a Linux 2618, whereas we will tell you, oh, this is an IP surveillance camera from this vendor with this firmware. It's got these ports open, and it's connected on this port on this switch, right? So you see the difference of how you can get a lot deeper into something. One example, we worked with a global telco, and they had different results from Tenable and from us. Tenable said it's CentOS. It's a CentOS box, no more information. We said it was like an F5 load balancer, specific model number and firmware and all of that stuff. They said, well, what is it? Because we were just the new kid on the block, and they'd been using Tenable for years. And so we looked into it, and turns out the F5 load balancer firmware is originally based on CentOS. That was what Tenable was fingerprinting. It was just, so it was also kind of correct. But what we were surfacing in terms of what the thing actually is on the network really helped them figure out who's the owner, what's the patch level, all of those things, to really go into that. So we then give you we also can figure out the software on the network. So think of very quickly finding certain types of software that you're hunting after. Let's say you have another SolarWinds exercise happens, and you need to figure out where do I have these things, or Exchange servers, those kind of things. Then we also tell you all of the end-of-life operating systems that you have. So for example, that's in this column here, and you see the query language here is pretty simple, right? Operating system end-of-life expired, true, done, right? So now we're showing you all of these, and some of these are embedded systems that are based on certain operating systems. And we surface that for you as well. Then this query here says basically has a private IP address and a public IP address. So it's a bridge between the public and the public internet and your private network. And the operating system is expired. So now you're getting a lot of contextual information, right? This is probably important if you have something on the internet that is no longer patchable and it bridges into the internal network. And we can also graph that out. So here, for example, in the center, you're seeing the internet. Every red bubble is a public subnet, and every green bubble is a private subnet. So this box here, for example, is something that bridges both devices. And we're seeing here, for example, that there's one public, looks like an IPv6 address, and then a lot of private addresses. Then we go a little bit deeper into the devices. So the active unauthenticated scanner, you can do this over the internet or behind the firewall in your network. Most of our customers use it behind the firewall because that's where they want to figure out the asset inventory. We can figure out a few fun things. So for example, here, we see that this Windows device has a Wi-Fi adapter and has a 5G card. So why is that important? I'll give you one example from one of our customers. This is a big technology company, and they're scanning their smart building network, so all of the building automation. This is like big tech company, and they have up to 6,000 devices just for building automation, sensors and all of these things. Light management, all of that stuff. And he was scanning his network, and he found a laptop on there that had a 5G card embedded. Some guy who'd come onto the network plugged that in. Now, that network's supposed to be completely segmented off from the rest, right? So that's a big risk. So these kind of things can really help you surface those devices. We also give you an overview of all of the protocols. So you can search by protocol, by port. You can say, hey, what protocols are non-standard ports, high ports, all of those things. But one thing that you, for example, can't do, let's say, with a vulnerability scanner is we track the SSH keys, which is not super hard, right? So that's the public key, the MD5 of the public key. And then we can pivot over that to show you how many of this exact SSH key do you have on the network. So there's typically two reasons why you might have that. One is it's an embedded device and it's just a hard-coded SSH key. Sometimes it's hard to do something about that. But what's more often the case is that you have a VM, a virtual machine, somebody set up an SSH key on the golden image, and you've cloned that hundreds of times. If any one of these machines gets owned, that means they can now do lateral movement into the other ones. So that's something that's very common on networks, and I don't know any other tool that can really give you that visibility. By the way, you saw how I pivoted over one of these, sorry, I need to go back here. One of these attributes here, we give you a lot of information here on the devices. Like we break every port, every piece of information down, And you can either say, all right, show me all of the MD5 keys with the same, by frequency, or you can say, find me exactly this one. So we're going to go into that a little bit later when we are pivoting over some information. So it's super easy once you start finding something to go from one piece of information to other things. How are we doing on time? All good. All right, perfect. So then, every time we find a web server, we take a screenshot. Sounds pretty simple, but it's super powerful. Especially if you have a distributed network, you might not be able to get to the asset from where you're sitting, but you're having trouble figuring out what it is. Might be a custom application, for example, right? Something that we can't natively fingerprint because it's unique to your environment. So we pull those, and then once you're at the console, you're trying to figure out what a certain device is. Oh, might be having internet issues here. Sorry about that. Let's try again. No, maybe the Wi-Fi may be dropped. So you can then look at the image, and that usually gives you a pretty good idea of what something is. When we're thinking about finding applications on the network, I mentioned SolarWinds, for example, was a big thing where people try to find a specific type of software or machine and so on. We can do that across the entire network. You don't need to rescan your network because we've already got all of the information. All you need to do is just query the local database for specific things that you're looking for. So if you're thinking of Log4j, when that broke, with a conventional vulnerability scanner, and we're not a vulnerability scanner, but we help in this very specific case, right? With a vulnerability scanner, when a 0-day breaks, typically you need to wait for a new vulnerability check to be published. For Log4j, that took all of the big vendors about 2 weeks because there were so many different applications that they needed to cover. It was evolving and so on. And then you need to rescan your network because the assessment is done at scan time. So after those 2 weeks, you download the vuln check, you need to find a maintenance window and rescan. So now you're looking at 2.5, 3 weeks until you know what's vulnerable. What we can do is you can just run a query against your local database, right? So that means you've scanned the network before, and when you're looking for very specific things, in this case it's certain applications and so on, you can just run that and it'll tell you all the things that are vulnerable to Log4j. Great on day one of a 0-day because you've got nothing patched and you need a starting point. Not great 3 months out. That's when you're better off with a conventional vulnerability scanner. So there's like two sides of the coin, and I think where people are struggling today is those kind of 0-day kind of scenarios. There's other queries, for example, here, public-facing Exchange servers. Exchange had a few vulnerabilities, so here you can really quickly find all of those. If you had a lot of mergers and acquisitions, or if you have a lot of stuff that's set up as test sites or disaster recovery things and so on. It sounds weird, but companies having a hard time sometimes finding these. We even pull in things like users from Active Directory from other sources. And so you can run queries of Active Directory accounts with non-expiring passwords, those kind of things. We can triangulate these as well. And you can also track ownership of assets. That might sound like something trivial, but it's actually super important. It not only matters to know what a device is, you also need to know who's responsible for that. And ownership is typically the user who's logged onto the device, it's the business owner, it's the IT owner, and often also the security owner. So there's different owners. If we're thinking back to Equifax, right, a long time ago, but this information I'm about to tell you came out much later and was, I think, missed. They knew that the server that was breached had the vulnerability. They had a list of owners and notified the owners of all the servers that were vulnerable. For the server that got breached, they had the wrong owner. So you see how a very little thing, just organizationally, can have a giant impact. One fun thing that we can also do, so with unauthenticated scanning, there are certain things that the devices just shouldn't give up. I showed you one earlier with 5G cards and Wi-Fi cards. Like, why would a Windows computer over the network remotely tell you this? There's some other fun ones. think the previous conversation was with Checkpoint. Their endpoint antivirus, we can fingerprint remotely. Kaspersky, we can fingerprint remotely. So if you're thinking through that, there's a few scenarios. You can, if you're running a sensitive network and you don't want to have Kaspersky on there, great. You can figure out very, very quickly if you have it on there. If you are running with a certain type of AV solution, let's say CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is not remotely fingerprinted, it's through an API integration, but the idea is the same. Let's say you want to know, do I have full coverage of CrowdStrike on all of my devices? All of the ones that can take a CrowdStrike agent, like your Polycom phone can't take a CrowdStrike agent. But your Windows servers can, your Windows desktops, et cetera, et cetera. So you can then run a query and say, tell me, for example, here we're saying, tell me all the Windows devices that don't have a CrowdStrike agent on them, right? So now you're getting to your white space. And that's often super important. It's important to defend your network. It's also sometimes important for compliance, because cyber insurance, some of the cyber insurance clauses say you must have 98% coverage of EDR on your endpoints, otherwise we won't pay out. So you need to be able to test that and prove that if you want the insurance payout. Here's another one. This one is, it has Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but is not scanned by Tenable. So this was a cool example from, this is actually a healthcare provider. They scanned all of their environment with Tenable. They had Microsoft Defender on all endpoints, or so they thought. And then they ingested all of this information into RunZero and saw that there's one subnet, a big subnet, that has a lot of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but no coverage for Tenable. So they started investigating. And it was a hospital that they'd acquired recently. And they were trying to scan it, but the new company the new hospital they had acquired had shut down all the ports on the firewall because they didn't want to be bothered, right? So those kind of things you probably want to learn about really quickly. So we call this security controls coverage. Where do I have EDR agents? Am I missing any subnets and those kind of things? Another fun example, this was with a theme park in Florida where they were testing out RunZero, and while they were doing the POC, they saw in their NetFlow information that something on their network, a specific internal IP, was reaching out to a known malicious IP in China. They were like, what the hell is this? They tried to look it up in the CMDB, they looked it up in all of their internal systems, couldn't figure it out. Then they said, well, we're just testing this new tool, let's see how it does. And so they put in the internal IP address, and it popped up as a Hikvision DVR. And so this is an example here. Your Tenable might only tell you this is like a Linux 2618 or something. Here, we tell you exactly what it is. So we also told them what switch and what port it's on. It was very easy for them to go in, take that off the network, and then, problem solved. But then they took a beat and they thought about, how many more of these things do we have on the network, right? Because we probably want to look at those too. So it's pretty straightforward. Just say, I want to see all the things that are hardware vendor Hikvision. Done, right? They got a list of, I think it was like 18 devices or so, looked at those, made a decision on what they wanted to do with them, and proceed. Hikvision is one of the vendors that is like persona non grata or device non grata, I guess, on government networks and critical infrastructure. There's a whole other list. There's Huawei, ZTE, you've probably heard the ones. Kaspersky is also on that list, right? And so we have one query here that takes all of these vendors and all of the OEMs and all of the subsidiaries and all of those things, and you can just run the query and figure out, what do I have on my network? This is a certain compliance requirement here for critical infrastructure and government entities. And you can just run that, and it gives you a list of all the things that are that fall under this provision, and you can then have a look at those and make a decision what you want to do about them. So I saw that you were taking some pictures. If you want to try this out, it's completely fine. I'm also happy to, it's not a deck, so I can't send it. But if you want to try this out at home or at your company, we have a free version. So this is being used by about 600 of our customers. These are all commercial customers, go from mid-market to big Fortune 50 companies, government agencies, all that stuff. But we also have over 20,000 users that use it in small organizations, at home, like just tinkering with it, or using it in production in small environments. Up to 256 assets, completely free, right? If you want to try this out, go to, I'll show you where you can get it, but essentially what you do once you get into the product is you pick the operating system that you want to install the active scanner on, right? So let's say this is a Mac, so you would click on here, you run the click on here and copy that command, run it in a terminal, installs a little scanner on your local device, and then you go and start a scan. So the scan is pretty straightforward. You have a scan rate. You probably know this if you've ever used Nmap. This is way simpler than Nmap, right? I always scratch my head when I open that back up and I'm trying to remember commands. You give it the discovery scope. It'll probably already have your local /24 pre-populated. And then you just hit scan. And we just hired a new person, and I was doing the interview. He said, like, oh, I tried this out. It took me 12 minutes from signing up on the website till I had the asset inventory of my home network. And so it's super fast to figure that out. If you want to do a global deployment in a giant company, it takes you a little bit longer, a few more minutes. But you kind of get that this is a very fast path to value. And then if you're looking at this in a corporate environment, then you can also connect all of these third-party API integrations. So, one thing is, some of you may not want a SaaS solution, right? So in that case, we have an on-premise solution. Some of you may have air-gapped networks. In that case, we have this thing here, which is just a command line scanner. It's self-contained. You run this in the air-gapped environment, outputs a JSON file, you upload that to your console, and you're good to go, right? So we have all of these areas covered. And we have a lot of companies that not only have IT and cloud, but also OT environments, anything from car manufacturing, windows and blinds, like a lot of manufacturing, to cities with utilities, biomedical devices, so healthcare providers, all those kind of things. And the scanner is set up so that it doesn't knock over devices. So if you've been in my talk yesterday, I talked at length about that. All right, so the website is runzero.com. Click on the top right here on free trial, and you just sign up. No credit card required. All you need is an email, and you're good to go. 21 days is the full product, and then if you don't want to proceed, you just click downgrade to starter edition. That's the always free version. Goes up to 256 devices. Try it out. Let me know what you think. And do we have time for questions? A little bit. 2 minutes. Yes.
So what level of automation is there? Like upfront, how much manual work is required to get to the
Yeah. So to get to the asset inventory is very little. So that's kind of like it depends on the size of the network, right? On a /24, it's literally like about 15 minutes and you're done. You have the asset inventory. Then you start digging into the data, and it depends on what you're looking for, right? We have certain queries and dashboards and so on with pre-populated stuff. You might be looking for something super specific. So then you dig in a little bit deeper. If you like, we can chat afterwards if you have a specific use case that you have in mind. I'd be happy to tell you or show you how we would solve that. All right. Yes?
You mentioned a lot around non-authenticated scans. Is there an option to do credentialed scans?
Okay, so the question was, I talked only about unauthenticated scans. Is there an option to do credentialed scans? So we do use credentials for the API sources. So when we're pulling in data from CrowdStrike, from Active Directory, from all of these sources, right? Of course, that's credentialed. We can take credentials for SNMP, so for all of the networking infrastructure. That gives you a lot more depth on the topology of the network. For the end devices, we actually don't take any credentials, so you can't even use that. Yeah. But you'd be surprised. Like, we did a rollout at a global rollout at a European high-end fashion conglomerate, right? And they baked us off against ServiceNow, the mid server. We found 2.5 times as many devices, and they afterwards sent us screenshots of like side-by-side comparison of the level of detail that we found. ServiceNow and us found the same level of detail on the devices. They were authenticated, we were not, right? It was really surprising. And so try it out on your home network and just see the level of depth we get into. It's not 100% on par with an authenticated scan. There are certain things you just can't see from the outside. But we found a ton of different, I call it like, 1,000 penetration testing parlor tricks on drawing all of these little pieces of information. All right, any more questions?
Kind of a follow-up to that. So with it not being credentialed, I'm guessing, so the tools mostly, if not at all, mostly if not all, more pull for information, not necessarily push for run this or do this.
Yeah, okay. So the question was, is the tool more to gather information or to also manage the devices? Is that correct? Okay, yes. We are a tool for visibility. We do not manage the device. Like we can't put a piece of software on the device or change a configuration. That's correct, yeah. All right, good. I think we're out of time. I'm getting there. Yep. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. All right, bye-bye. Find me if you have any questions.